God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello, and welcome to NFL Moneyball. We're in Week 17, the final week of the NFL regular season. This program is being brought to you by NFL-ESP.com and the National Football League Extended Strategic Principles System. I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. For more information on me, you may go to my website, markanthonydebello.com, and for more information on this program and the system, you may click on the Sports tab. A lot to cover in this half-hour program. We're going to divide it as we have the previous weeks. The first half of the program will be dedicated to commentary on pro sports, especially football, the NFL ESP system, and then the second half, for those of you who have an interest in the investment or the fantasy football side of professional football. So without any further delay, let me get into the program. And again, we'll cover the NFL-ESP.com, ESP.com perspective, a few topics, and then in the second half, the investments, and including in there last week's prognostications and predictions, and as well as Week 17, and some final thoughts on the playoffs and a playoff recap. So let me begin. I've made some comments during the beginning of the year on some commercials. Here's three that really are annoying me. I already mentioned the Ford commercial where they talk about basically marriage and marrying a car. Now the other one they've had on is about bear arms, a right to bear arms. So they're trying to make a statement there about gun control, and it's a foolish, foolhardy commercial with a guy with arms of a bear. It's just totally foolish. Another one is the Bud Light series of commercials, one with my dear coach from college, Coach Jimmy Johnson, where he's gets into a mock electric football game with a guy, and then they have a similar one with Warren Sapp, and the guy is supposedly the Bud Light drinker, surprised. These are all setups. It's really demeaning to me that these commercials are, lead viewers to believe they're real. They're not. They're all setups. It's all acting. And in addition, pro athletes, typically to become pros, they don't drink Bud Light. They don't drink beer. They don't drink alcohol. They don't do drugs. That's what it really takes to be a pro, okay? Now, certainly guys weaken, they get some money, they, through attrition or, temptation and sin, they might turn to those things once pros, but it will end their careers sooner than later. And again, it's definitely, I think, bad advertising and a bad message to send to foolish young viewers who don't know any better and think that that's what it takes to get in the NFL. The last commercial I want to make note of is one who's certainly against any kind of violence, especially domestic violence, and I appreciate the NFL and who they are as a non-for-profit company and what they try to promote and try to, portray as being, to me, the greatest of all pro sports leagues, is these No More campaigns. I see a lot of these, now I don't want to call them actors, but professional athletes who I think are crying crocodile tears and saying that this is tough to talk about. Unless they were a domestic abuser themselves and have reformed or were on the other side of that, I think it should be demeaning and offensive to those who have really suffered domestic abuse and violence. I've actually counseled people who have, and to see somebody like Chris Carter who basically looks to advertise or want to promote anything, and I give him props for being, I believe, a Christian and getting off of drugs or whatever addiction issues he used to have and violence issues, but I don't know his total background, but I get the feeling, that he has no real direct experience. He's just, trying to make a statement. The person who I really find offense with, and I believe she's now appearing in these ads, is Hillary Swank. I don't know that she's one who's experienced these abuses. I recall making a prediction when she won an Academy Award. I think it was nominated and forgot to mention her husband in the speech, that it wouldn't be long before they were divorced, and they were. But she's typically, just an actress. That's really where her heart lies. I don't believe she believes in God, and I definitely don't. I definitely don't believe she believes in God, and I definitely don't believe she's been a victim of domestic abuse or violence. A couple of commentators I want to make note of here in the media, positive and negative, I guess. Ray Lewis, who is a former Cane, who I respect wholeheartedly as a player, well, as a player, I certainly respect him. As a fellow Cane myself, and as a pro athlete, Ray was phenomenal. Definitely, to me, one of the, if not the most, the best, the most well-dressed broadcaster in television. I mean, he is really dressed. But, God bless Ray. I once tried to be a proponent of making certain that every college football player was to take an English course. I mean, these players get so much visibility now, so much media coverage, such a platform. I mean, the basic thing that the basic class every player should take is English, to learn how to speak well, speak properly. Even I am not perfect in English, but Lord knows I keep trying to improve. But just confusing adjectives and just tense and such, and it doesn't really bode well. On the negative side, another media member really annoys me is Phil Simms. I never liked him. I especially didn't like him when he took the Lord's name in vain on national television. He uses, with Christmas coming up, this is Monday, by the way, just following the Monday night game, Denver against Cincinnati, it just reminded me of Phil Simms, who took the name, Jesus Christ in vain in a complaint about something, and is, to me, the most arrogant and egotistical broadcaster on television. He'll never admit he's wrong, and he always sort of degrades and verbally abuses. I think it's Jim Nance, his partner in the booth. He just annoys me. Another note here I wanted to make on a player now, before I talk a little bit about the NCAA, is Geno Smith. I saw an article just came out that he said that a coaching change would be refreshing for the Jets. Well, I've long been but at least this season, a proponent of Rex Ryan. I think he's a great coach. He's got his guys playing late into the season. But the biggest problem at the Jets is the quarterback. Undoubtedly, every NFL-ESP statistical, hallmark statistic or meaningful statistic or data proves that this team needs a new quarterback. And I've said in the beginning of the year, in the first few programs when it looked like the Jets were going to tank, that I thought they had the potential at the beginning of the year to be a wild card team based on their defense and their running game and their coach, which I think are all top notch. If they can just get to Marcus Mariota through the draft, you're going to see the Jets be a wild card team in 2015. Geno Smith is the biggest negative on the Jet offense. Not to discredit him totally as a human being, although I don't know how I can say what he said, and certainly he is a pro athlete. I'm not, never was, so I don't mean to disrespect him in that way. But just in relation to the other starting quarterbacks and the other quarterbacks in the league and what's going on in the Jets, I wholeheartedly believe that the Jets would be better served to get a new quarterback and not a new coach, especially head coach. So while I mentioned some of the prognostications I had during the season, let me go over, and you can just go back and play the tape, and I appreciate anybody and everybody who's been listening all year long, especially the last, I don't know about last week, but the week before we had, more listeners than I think in previous weeks. So I'm grateful and appreciative, and ask anybody who's hearing this to spread the word. Simply offering free advice, free prognostications, production. I don't think you're going to hear anybody who's more accurate. And again, I offer it freely because I try to live by an expression that says in the Bible, freely given, freely received, freely given, which means God gave me all my intelligence. He gave me a lot of prophetic abilities, and, who am I to prostitute myself and go and sell them? Now, in some ways, some of that data, in research, I should be able to, God bless, profit, Profit, But again, prophetically, PROPHET, I've offered all this information free during the season, and I think if you followed it, especially in the investment data, you'd be way ahead of the game. Now, I speak about that because I just had sent a report, or NFL-ESP report, to Coach Trestman of the Bears. Coach is like my brother. I love him dearly. One of the things we projected, and I don't, for ministerial reasons, relay this to everybody or our emails to one another, but I will just say that we have long been a proponent of the two-point conversion. The Bears did very well at their two-point conversions this year. If you even want to equate 4th and 2s to a two-point conversion, they did even better. And if you even wanted to stretch that statistic out to 3rd and 2s, they did very well. And typically, again, what we've been espousing is for underdog teams or teams who are power rated low, or, as we have a PSI, which is a power spread index, as the game progresses, if you're down in yardage or down in turnovers, or you're not being productive in settling for field goals or missed field goals, you need to be more aggressive as the game progresses to improve your probability factor. So certain coaches have done that a little bit this year. I've seen they've made some differences. Other coaches, tragically, like the Bears, coach didn't adapt enough, and certainly it's not all on coach. I think he's a great coach. I think he should stay coach of the Bears. They just have a talent problem. I noted at the beginning of the year, I just reviewed the tape that I said on week 1. It was really just up to the defense. It really just depended on the defense. They rolled the dice, brought in, restructured the whole defense. If the coordinator could have got them restructured properly, or the GM, and the Bears clicked just right on there, the offense would have performed better and they would have had a better record. But the defense, they didn't get it to click. They didn't just fit all the exact puzzle pieces right for the scheme and the model and what needed to be done. And that was really the biggest detriment to the offense this year, was the lack of defense. Attrition and injuries started to accumulate, because when you're a weaker team, you're going to get injured more. And then as they started to weaken and had to be on the field more, and then opponent defenses were able to play pass coverages, it led to more offensive, quarterback turnovers, whether that was interceptions or fumbles or just, lack of production on the offense. So, again, it's not on Coach Trestman as far as I'm concerned, although, as noted, and to him especially, that NFL ESP data has proven to increase a team's win productivity by 10 to 15% in one or two games per NFL season, maybe in some cases 3. I did see in this last Detroit game where there were some decisions or some things that could have been done that would have actually perhaps turn that game into a victory. But nonetheless, it didn't matter, because the Bears were going to be out of the playoffs, basically, and the best strategy any team can do, whether it's the Bears or the Jets or any team who's out of it, the best thing they can do, because injuries really amp up in the last 2 weeks of the season, is to rest your best players, not jeopardize injury, and also, not change the status quo. Do whatever's been, having you lose games. I mean, don't try to win the last 2 games. Get in position for a draft pick. All you really have to do is keep the integrity with the league so they don't get too suspicious, if you will. I'm not saying to do anything undermining, and I'm not saying to wholeheartedly tank is the word everybody uses, but you play your subs, you play their second string, you let them play as hard as they can to try to win, but if you're in the managerial position or the ownership position, what you really want to do, and the Colts did it really effectively to get Andrew Luck, they didn't change the status quo. They kept things the way they were going. And if you're going to be, what the Bears are, I guess, is 5-10, or 5-9 when they were. Why not go 5-10? Why not go 5-11? It's more important to get that draft pick. So we've got about a minute to go before I get into the investment side of things. So I want to recap a little bit of the prognostications and predictions we made from the beginning of the season, then go over last week. In this last minute I want to mention NCAA football. From the beginning of the year, early on, we thought the national title game would be Oregon over Florida State. But just the way the seeding was done, it's Oregon against Florida State in one of the semifinal rounds. We project, even though they're 9-point power spread favorites, that Oregon will go ahead and go through that number. I would certainly take Heisman Trophy winner, and congratulations to him, Marcus Mariota, over Jameis Winston. And then I believe Alabama will probably end up beating Ohio State. That game might be closer in the power spread than people anticipate. And then I believe Oregon will go ahead and beat Alabama for the national championship. And I certainly believe Marcus Mariota, I think, is going to be a dynamic figure and should be the first pick in the draft. And I still, because he's in the same model as Johnny Manziel, I have not given up hope on Johnny Manziel. As we projected when he was drafted, he should have gotten in the lineup in Cleveland earlier. I think it would have been an entirely different situation there in Cleveland, and I don't know that Cleveland was the best team for him. Actually, either Houston or Dallas. It looks like Dallas did a good job by drafting, this Zach Martin, who everybody gives a lot of props to on the offensive line. Always been a fan of Tony Romo, but Houston was probably the team that really should have drafted Johnny Manziel. Smaller, I don't want to say they're a small market city, but just a certain perfect type of niche where he didn't have to go too far from home, because Clowney, who we projected would not perform or produce very well, has not. If he did this year, Clowney that is, Houston would have made it into the playoffs, and they were our wild card pick in the AFC. But anyway, so let me recap the playoff system, or the playoffs that we had projected, and then I'll go over last week's predictions. We were pretty accurate. And then get into Week 17, the final predictions, and then make a few playoff predictions, because this will be the next to last program. I will tape, God willing, prayerfully, at the end of the regular season, one playoff scenario, and from every aspect, 1 half-hour program covering the playoffs after the regular season. So in the AFC, New England won their division. We actually projected they'd probably have 13 wins this season. We thought if you were an investment-minded person, they have an over-under investment for total wins, that you would really wholeheartedly want to invest as much as you possibly could on New England to go over. I think the number was 9 or 10, and they certainly, I think it was 10. And they'll probably land on 12-4, I think, actually, because I think Buffalo can actually beat them in the final week. But either way, they're going to be over and have 12 or 13 wins, and we projected that. In the AFC North, surprisingly, just saw Cincinnati with home calls, which they needed, which they, like I said, they get a dramatic home field advantage this year. All teams have 4 to 7 points, especially in the smaller, cities who really need it. Cincinnati was one of those teams. I saw a couple of really, really bad calls. One in particular, John Gruden pointed out, was a late hit, throwdown, and then I forget the other one, but there was a couple real bad calls there. So surprisingly, I thought Cincinnati would miss the playoffs. I have to admit that. Happy, though, because one of our partners has them, one of my teammates, to win the Super Bowl. I think that's those odds are astronomical, but he's got him at about 60 to 1. So, I'm rooting for him in that sense. Excuse me. Pittsburgh surprised a little bit. I think they've done a lot better than I thought they would. Baltimore, I still think, is going to get in the playoffs. Amazingly, 3 teams from that division will get in. I think they're going to end up beating Cleveland this week, and then San Diego losing to Kansas City, but I'll get into that later on here. And then Baltimore makes the playoffs, which is one of the teams we projected from the beginning of the season. Indianapolis, we projected to win the South, and they did. Thought Houston could be a wild card. We knew they would improve dramatically from 2 wins, and they did. They're 8-7 now, and I believe actually they'll probably beat Jacksonville, although I think Jacksonville will keep that game close. It could be a Jacksonville upset. And Houston will end up being 9-7. Now, if they had Clowney in there, that's a 10-6 team, okay? But again, and if they had Manziel, I wholeheartedly believe they would have been a wild card team, or could have beaten Indianapolis to win that division, which is what we projected from the beginning of the season. And then lastly, in the AFC West, we projected Denver by default. And if you can see now at the end of the year, Denver is I think has been overrated. Peyton Manning, God bless him, I think he's the best quarterback ever, but I think he's definitely on his downslide. I like to call him Pouty Peyton now. He seems to pout a lot, threw a lot of INTs in this game, and I definitely think Denver will be the biggest upset in the AFC, in the sense that a lot of people think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. I don't believe they'll even get by. They won't get by New England, and I think they could actually lose in a round before then, maybe to somebody like Indianapolis. So, again, Denver by default, but we predicted that. And don't worry, we've got 10 minutes left. I'll have more than enough time to get to the final week's projections. In the NFC, this same partner who had Cincinnati had Dallas. Surprisingly, I wouldn't have put Dallas in there. I thought Philly would win that division, and was kind of against Dallas all year long, but they did surpass my expectations. I should have been on them a little bit more, but I was a little shy because the media kept saying Dallas, and I really hate to agree with them, and 90% of the time they're inaccurate, and they just change their picks week to week. So I'm just giving you an honest assessment from the beginning of the season. In the NFC North, we projected to be Green Bay and Detroit 50-50 right down to the end. We thought that Chicago could get that mix and make it 33% across the board. But again, they underperformed their talent from the beginning of the year. They didn't use NFL ESP the way they should have. If they did, they would have been in a 33%, one-third opportunity to win that division. And again, we project even in this last game, it's going to really come down to Detroit just being a little more conservative, although Coach Caldwell's done a great job with his discipline, and we knew from Coach Schwartz last year that would turn Detroit around. So they're vying with Green Bay. Again, we tend to underestimate Green Bay, although I do think Aaron Rodgers is MVP, should be MVP this year as far as I can tell. But I'll analyze that better in Week 17. But we always underestimate Green Bay a little bit because we think Chicago is going to do better. In the NFC South, right now, it comes down to Carolina and Atlanta. As we projected about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I believe Carolina is still going to win this division. I believe they're going to defeat Atlanta. And again, it was only because they had a really hard schedule this year, I think the toughest in the NFL, that their win-loss record is only, at the best, can be 7-8-1. But that's pretty darn good for a Carolina team who has lost some players on defense, which was their strength. And again, I think they're going to defeat Atlanta and get in the playoffs, and we'll be accurate there. So I just challenge anybody to listen to anybody and everybody from the media at the beginning of the year, what they projected, what they said. We projected New England to lose to Seattle in the Super Bowl, although I hated to have repeats, Super Bowl winners. And then after week 2 and about halfway through, altered that projection just a bit. Depending on home field advantage, we'll still leave it with that if Seattle gets home field, they'll get to the Super Bowl again, and if Green Bay gets home field, they'll get there. But either way, now project New England to defeat both of those teams. I think the AFC is, which you could really never tell, the cyclical motion of who's going to be the more powerful conference, and it had been the AFC for a long time, about 10 years. Then the NFC took over about the last 2, 3, or 4, and now it looks like it's going to revert back to the AFC because I think all of these AFC teams are better than basically, the 2 premier NFC teams who are Seattle and Green Bay. So having said that, let's go over last week what we had done from an investment side and give you a little inclination as to what's going to happen, what we believe will happen in the final week of the NFL regular season. We like the Jags over the Titans. They were a 3-point under favorite, but we know that means in some parlances and the way we look at it, sometimes they're actually the underdog, and that's the first time they were favored in something like 42 games, and they ended up winning, and we had projected Jacksonville to do that. We projected San Diego to defeat San Francisco. Great comeback. They did that. We knew that there would be a tricky game with Philly and Washington. Washington ended up winning straight up. Didn't quite expect that, but knew they would cover because there was no way, if you know what an investment called a teaser is, that the house would let you win with 2 teasers. The 2 teams you needed on Saturday, that number was hugely skewed in Philadelphia's favor. And everybody in every square, as they call them, or the public, if you will. I have a different word. I don't want to say it. My father, I love him, told me not. It's a little derogatory. I'll just say it once. Huckleberry would invest in Philadelphia, and you won't hear me say it again. No disrespect to anybody, but they would tease Philadelphia, so they all missed there. In the Sunday games, I thought Miami would defeat Minnesota through the number that they did. They didn't. They ended up winning, though. Tampa Bay played Green Bay. We thought Tampa Bay would keep it close, but that goes to show how bad they are this year and how good Green Bay turned out to be. We thought Detroit would run through the number for Chicago. The turnovers were the difference there in keeping that game close. I think I wrote, Coach, that it would have been 28-17, something like that, without the turnovers, or 28 or 27-14. I don't have the right in front of me without the Lion turnovers. the Falcons and Saints, we knew the Saints would keep it. The Falcons would keep it close with the power spread. Thought the Saints might actually win that, but again, we basically were predicting those Saints games pretty correctly. Again, but too close a game to call unless you were just investing in the Falcons plus the points. Thought the Jets would keep it close with the Patriots, and they did. We thought Ashley in the beginning had liked Pittsburgh, but then I too have suffered from attrition and a lack of confidence throughout the year, and we altered that a little bit, but Pittsburgh ended up winning. Thought Cleveland with Johnny Manziel could end up beating Carolina. He got hurt. That changed everything in that game, I think, but still thought that might be a close game. Houston against Baltimore. We thought Houston would keep that close with the power spread. They ended up winning straight up and was a good second half play. The Giants and the Rams, I can never figure these Giants out, being from upstate New York. I knew a lot of people were investing in the Rams. I thought the Rams would win. The Giants ended up winning that. Buffalo and Oakland, we thought that Oakland would keep it close against Buffalo in that one. The Colts and Cowboys we knew could go either way. Didn't know really like anybody that the Cowboys would blow them out. I'm not surprised, though, that the Colts made substitutions in the second half, and you could have invested in the Cowboys again there. And we've got a few minutes left that I can get to the last week. Seattle, Arizona, thought Arizona would keep it close, but was wrong there. And then we thought Denver would go through the number at Cincinnati and beat them, so I was actually wrong there. But Cincinnati did get the home calls, which I did know was something to fear. So in Week 17, listen closely. Here we go. We're going to lay it out here in the next 3.5 minutes or so. The Lions are playing the Packers. The Packers are the better team. I think you're going to see Detroit be a little conservative. That's going to cost them. I think they could keep it close with the power spread number, but certainly I believe Green Bay has a really high percentage probability of winning that game. I think Houston is going to beat Jacksonville. They're playing for basically pride in what they think is going to be a wild card position, but I wouldn't be surprised if I would actually invest in Jacksonville to cover the game and maybe win straight up. I wouldn't probably invest in that game, though. Cincinnati's playing Pittsburgh in a game for just the division title and position. I think Pittsburgh's the better team, and I would play them, but again, Cincinnati's not going to get the calls they get at home, and I think Pittsburgh's the better team, but they're suffering a little bit in the secondary. The Colts are playing the Titans. This is a game where I think the Titans are going to actually cover and probably could win straight up only because the Colts rest players or the situation falls that the game is meaningless for them by the second half, which I don't think is going to happen. But I think, and you'll see this, a lot of these underdog teams are going to be playing their quote-unquote Super Bowl. They know they're out of it, and they really want to knock out teams who have a chance to either get in or, more so than get position. But, these underdogs tend to play and perform really well in the final week playing their quote-unquote Super Bowl. And the Colts are the type of team, as we saw last week, to rest players. And I think they might, just play really hard in the first quarter, first half, and then get a lead and then rest the second half players. Cleveland's playing Baltimore. This is a must-win for Baltimore. I think Baltimore is actually going to win this game. With the new quarterback in there at Cleveland now because Hoyer's questionable, I think that will definitely, accommodate Baltimore for the win. If Manziel was in there, I would have played Cleveland with the points. I still think Cleveland can keep the game closer than the power spread, but somehow or another, like you'll see, I think Baltimore's going to get in and catch that wild card position. New England's playing Buffalo. We liked Buffalo before New England got the divisional bye. This will definitely be Buffalo's Super Bowl. They'll play New England close, I think, and New England, although Brady hates to rest, I think New England will sporadically rest their starters and strategically rest some of them along the way, and it's just too many points already to give to give Buffalo. I think you'll see Buffalo covering. The Jets are going to play their hearts out for Rex Ryan. I think they're going to defeat the Dolphins straight up here. The best thing that the Jets got going for them is that the Dolphins endorsed Philbin for next year, so that's not going to give them as much impetus or motivation to want to go ahead and beat the Jets. But the Jets definitely will play their Super Bowl against the Dolphins. Carolina is our best play of the week, I think. I think Carolina is a better team in Atlanta. Take the points. They're going to beat Atlanta. Minnesota, I think, is going to defeat Chicago, even though Chicago went back to Jay Cutler. I would go with Minnesota in this game. I think the Bears, as we projected the last couple weeks, have lost a lot of motivation. I love Coach. I know he's still trying, but I think the Bears are smart enough strategically to know that the best thing they can do is to, get draft picks and protect players. This is our second best play probably. I think Kansas City is going to play the Super Bowl against San Diego, knock San Diego out of the playoffs. I would take Kansas City here in the situation, laying points. And again, I think they're going to defeat San Diego and knock San Diego out. The Giants and Philly, the Giants, I think, are going to play harder for Coughlin than the Eagles are for Kelly. Thinking that Coughlin might have his job in question, where Chip Kelly's is solid. And I think the Giants are just a little bit better team now, with especially that change to Beckham. Redskins are going to play their Super Bowl against the Cowboys. You don't know who the Cowboys are going to rest. They would be prone to resting Tony Romo, and he's key there. Saints and Patriots are a toss-up either way. If New Orleans feels like playing, they'll win. If they have quit already because they're not in the playoffs, they'll lose. Seattle is playing for some home field advantage, so they're going to try against the Rams, but I think the Rams will keep it close with the power spread. The Niners are playing their Super Bowl for Coach Harbaugh. I think they're going to defeat the Cardinals. I think you're definitely going to see that. And in closing, the Raiders are playing their Super Bowl against the Broncos. I don't know if they can win straight up, but I definitely know and believe they can cover with the points, and I think Denver's overrated. So listen, that's it for Week 17 here on NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL-ESP.com. I'm your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. Thank you, and God bless you.